All right, it's 6 o'clock. Welcome everyone to our February 25th, 2025 public work session. I will now call the work session to order. And we'll start off, Mr. Quiet.
Thank you, President Scott, School Board of Trustees, and Dr. Huff. I'm excited to introduce a partner of ours, Mr. Barry Gardner with Policy Analytics. Barry has many years of experience in public education as an educator, as a coach, as an administrator, and now he works with Policy Analytics. And he's going to give us a little bit of background on property tax, kind of what Elkhart counties looks like, specifically Elkhart Community Schools, and some factors that we can help educate the public and consider as a school board as we move forward strategically in Elkhart Community Schools. So I will turn it over to Mr. Barry Gardner.
Thank you. Good evening, board. Dr. Huff, appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you this evening. Again, just real briefly, Policy Analytics is a firm based out of Indianapolis, and we specialize in helping provide economic analysis for government units, really primarily on the property tax side in terms of tax rates, property tax revenues, and the impacts of those areas. And so work with about 60 school districts across the state. And one of the things that we do for school districts is what we call a property tax analysis, where we help the district really understand the makeup of your community in terms of assessed value, property tax revenue, and some of the levers that sometimes pull. And so that's what we'll kind of go through tonight. More than happy to answer any questions throughout with the report, but if not, I'll go ahead and get started here. So again, just a little bit there with ourselves, I'll move through. One of the things we often talk about with boards across the state is the complexity with school finance. As simple as we often hope it would be to understand how schools receive revenue and how tax rates are formed, it's a very complicated system. And for school districts, you're often faced with many of these areas, from circuit breaker in terms of dollars you don't collect, to assess value changes, to, long-range stability in terms of your finances, to legislative changes, which are currently happening and being discussed. It's a quiet week down at the State House, which is a good week, I think, in some regards within that. But a lot of bills being proposed, right, in terms of that. We've heard about property tax reform quite a bit. And so, again, all of those things create moving parts for school districts. And at Policy Analytics, our goal is to help really analyze that information on those uncertainties, provide some clarity for the district of how your story is, right? And what is your story when it comes to your finances, especially on the side? And then what's that plan of action? Knowing that information, how does the district react? What are the things you should be aware of to ultimately, again, provide what the success for the district in terms of providing services and supports for students at the end of the day. So the first piece really is our tax base analysis, and going to start out here. This is a map on the left-hand side of the chart, is a map that is outline of the school district boundaries. So that's Elkhart Community Schools. And then within that, you see a number of colors that represent the different taxing districts within the school boundaries. All school districts typically have multiple taxing districts. We often refer to those as incorporated and unincorporated. Incorporated means they have a city or town associated with them, a municipal unit. On the right-hand side of the page, you can see each of those units and the overall tax rate associated within each of those. The school district's tax rate's kind of in that light blue at that rounded up 92 cents. There's a county tax rate in many of these, a township, sometimes a library, and then you can see the municipal tax within that, and that would be the city tax rate. We call those overlapping units because as they stack, they create a liability on taxpayers, and then also have impact on what each of those units receive at the end of the day in terms of dollars. And so it's important to understand that you have different taxing districts. They have different rates, and depending on those rates, they could have different liability and different impacts. So sometimes we want a broad sweep, right, of tax increase or tax decrease or liability, and it's going to play out very differently depending potentially on where you live within the community based on those overlapping factors. The other piece that we look at then within that is what are the number of parcels that are what we call at the property tax cap. And a parcel is a piece of property. So it could be a home, could be an apartment complex, could be a commercial business, but it's really any property inside of the township, or excuse me, the community boundaries. And the orange on this chart represents the parcels that are at the cap. And what we mean by at the cap, if you're familiar, in 2009, Indiana voted in property tax caps of 1%, 2%, and 3%. 1% for homeowners, 2% for apartments and agriculture, and 3% for commercial. And your tax liability means that you can, as a homeowner, for example, can only pay 1% of the gross assessed value of your home. So if your home is assessed at $200,000, you can only pay $2,000 in property taxes, regardless of what may be asked as a part of the math calculation of tax rates. So what we say there is a tax liability may be $2,400 for that homeowner, but the most they can pay is $2,000. They're at the cap, right? And so that's important to understand, because if a district were to lower the rate in that situation, that taxpayer may not feel any relief in an area that has high tax cap impact. Wherein some of the townships where we don't have that city rate, they would feel the impact of tax rate movement, both as an increase or decrease. So again, that creates a little bit of complication in the story, because a movement a district or a unit may make is going to have different impacts in each of these areas for each of those homeowners in terms of their liabilities. One of the really important pieces with your makeup as a school district is the assessed value composition, as we call it. And these are, where do the parcels in the school corporation fall into various taxing categories? Residential, industrial, commercial, apartments, and then personal property. And we want to look at this because at the end of the day, this is going to impact the dollars that come into the school district in terms of property tax revenue. It's going to have an impact on that. This is actually a very diverse tax base. We work with a lot of school corporations where the pie of this chart is 70% residential versus the 60% here. And when you're more residential, resident homesteads are going to hit those tax caps first. And so it's going to start to limit property tax revenue. So this is actually what we'd say a very diverse, which is a positive piece in terms of, at the end of the day, what dollars is the district going to receive into your operations fund or debt service fund. And so that's an important piece. You can see the breakout there. On the right-hand side, we often track the changes from year to year. While we see some big movements in things like ag and apartments, it doesn't have a whole lot of impact. It doesn't move the needle for the district because they're such a small part of your overall assessed value. What's really going to determine growth and assessed value for the district is your residential, which are going to be home prices, and then any movement in the business kind of commercial sector. Right, that's really what's going to drive things here within the district. This is on the left-hand side. I'll focus on this chart for right now. Is just the historic trend in gross assessed value. So what has been the assessed value growth? And we've seen growth in assessed value here in the district over the last 10 years, and that's typical. Within that, we've cut off, in some ways, it's far enough past when the 2009, 2010, when the recession came into play, and we actually saw assessed values decline across the state. Now in this piece with the last 10-year look, it is a much more upward positive trend. And then you can see the individual categories. The biggest change for the most part is the residential. The gray bars that you see has seen the biggest growth in terms of assessed value. And again, that's what we talked about. It's about 60%. It really drives the assessed value, which again is going to impact revenue, going to impact tax rates within that. And that is primarily driven by this chart. So what this chart shows us is the gross assessed value of homes within the community over the last 10 years. And they're broken out by percentiles. The green is the 25th percentile. The orange is the median gross assessed value in the district. The red line there is the average, and then the blue is the 75th percentile. So kind of a range of home values. Gross assessed value is relatively correlated to home price, sales price. Our assessed value system is what we call a market-based system. So as home prices increase or decrease, the assessed value is going to follow that in some correlation. And so when you look on the right-hand side of this chart and you see the run up in terms of that average gross assessed value, that's pretty typical in most districts across the state. And if you think of the last 3 to 4 years in home prices, not only across the state, but across the country, we have seen a pretty dramatic rise in home prices. It really doesn't matter where you've lived, right? And because of that, assessed value tends to follow that. So that's been a piece within that. What that also does, kind of at the end of the day for a homeowner, is as my assessed value goes up, so does my liability of what I can pay, right? And so that's when you often hear about property tax reform or you hear about increase in tax bills, it is because the assessed value or the value of the home is going up. And in our current property tax system, when the value of a home goes up, that means that you in turn can potentially pay more in property tax dollars or property tax liability. And so that speaks to that a little bit here in terms of both what we've seen across the state, what you're maybe hearing down at the State House, and then really kind of that localized context of terms of your assessed value growth. Part of our data really comes, we track a number of different kind of data points to project assessed value, because one of the things we tend to bring to the district is projecting assessed value moving forward. And we use home prices to do so. This is localized to Elkhart County, and it shows the year-over-year change in median sales price within the county. And it can give us a little bit of insight. Part of the reason we look at this, if I want to focus from 23 to 24, you can see the median sales price went up about 5%. Sales data that happened in 2024 will be assessed in 25 and will be a part of your 26 assessed value when you talk about your budget in 26. And so what this is telling us, and we're seeing this really across the state, is that home prices are still trending upward, and that means assessed value is still going to have a projection of trending upward as well. So just a kind of a localized piece that we use amongst building permits, commercial data. Just for reference, our software goes back about the last 15 years of assessed value of every single parcel. So when we do an analysis for your assessed value here in the community, it's not taking this percentage and saying, hey, we're going to think your assessed value is going to grow by 5%. We actually have data on every single piece of property, and we're able to analyze changes in the economy to those individual parcels to help project that out moving forward. And so it's a really granular report at the end of the day. Probably if you ever want to go to sleep, I can send you some of that data, and I'm sure it will help you be some light reading material to go through all of that. So, but it's really important because it helps us understand that localized context, right? And because every community is going to have their own story in terms of changes that are happening in the economy and home prices, and we want that to be reflective in those projections. The second piece that's really important as well is your tax revenue does not come from the gross assessed value. While that's important, overall, it comes from the net assessed value. And you can see the change in this chart is that the residential pie gets smaller. And the reason for that is homesteads are the only group that have deductions. There's a standard deduction of $48,000 on a home and a supplemental deduction of 35%, which brings down that assessed value that we actually tax against. And so when we do that, you can see that homes actually become a little smaller portion and the commercial side becomes a little larger. And again, that's a good thing in terms of having a diverse tax base. So if there are changes in any of these individual areas in the economy, they're somewhat protected, right? It's kind of like a stock portfolio, right? If you're heavily invested in one area and that area has a drawback, it's going to be more impactful. When you're spread out and diversified, it allows you to adjust to those changes. So that, again, is another positive for the school district. A lot of numbers to this chart within this. but I think it's really important for some of the work that we do with Mr. Quiet in terms of helping the district understand future financial capacity when it comes to your operations fund and your debt service fund. The easiest way sometimes to is assessed value is a little bit like a wallet, right? The bigger it grows, the more dollars that are potentially available, which are important because at the end of the day, we have inflationary costs. Things become more expensive. We need to reinvest in our buildings. And so we need some of that additional capacity potentially. And so the blue on this chart shows the historic growth in your assessed value year over year. And again, been fairly positive overall. The orange is where we're projecting kind of moving forward. And again, we're still pretty bullish on the housing in terms of the economy, that right now we feel like assessed value is going to stay fairly strong in terms of growth. Again, another positive as we try to plan moving forward. The colors in the middle have a little story to them. In 2023, the state legislators passed House Bill 1499, which changed that supplemental deduction I just mentioned. It increased it from 35 to 40% in 2024. That was to give homeowners some property tax relief. Because if I increase the deduction, that lowers that net AV that we're going to tax against. So that was the intent. What it did was actually pull aside some of your assessed value growth. So if you look at the bar there on 2024, if that bill had not passed, the district's assessed value would have grown by about 10%. That's a really strong number. It grew by 6.7% because that deduction pulled some of that AV away. But it's not lost. It comes back because that deduction goes from 40% down to 37.5 in 25, and then back to 35%, in 26. So if you can see for 2025, we said if they had not passed that bill, you would have only grown by 6.1, but you actually had a little stronger growth, some non-organic growth really in that deduction rolling off. While that's kind of in the weeds, the reason I bring it up is it's really important based on what we're hearing down at the State House, because they're talking about, again, deduction changes potentially for homeowners. And if those happen, we know that those could potentially have impact on our assessed value moving forward, which is, again, is going to impact the revenue and dollars available for the school district. And that's something we're going to want to watch closely and try to monitor and model out to help the district understand any potential changes that might either A, increase your tax rates, or B, lower the revenue without you doing anything differently, really at the end of the day. Last piece here, and I know there's a lot of numbers within this. This is just an example of what we provide for the school district. It's really to help you make informed decisions. And this is one scenario that we run. We run a number of scenarios, but this is just simply if the district for last few years has maintained about a 92-cent tax rate. And we said if the district were to continue maintaining that 92-cent rate, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner there, you can see the tax rates there. What we then help project out is based on the assessed value growth, what revenue will you see? And that's that certified levy there on the top left-hand side. And for example, that grows over time as assessed value grows. However, the district also experiences what we call circuit breaker loss, which are dollars you do not collect because that homeowner has hit the cap. Once they hit that cap, they can't pay anymore in terms of property taxes, and so those dollars go uncollected. It's about a $3.4 million impact on the district of dollars you don't receive. So we're able then to model that out because if the district is to change any of those inputs on tax rates, it could change that circuit breaker. If the legislative body were to change any of the levers, it could change the circuit breaker impact. And at the end of the day, that determines how much revenue you end up in the operations fund. The greater the circuit breaker impact, the fewer dollars you have in the operations fund. And we want to monitor that again as we talk about that long-range financial planning and that long-range stability. Depending on those moves, we want to understand what that impact is going to have financially for the school district. And so, again, didn't want to get too far into the weeds, but at least wanted to show you some of the work that we're doing with the district. And at the end of the day, one of the questions I always ask Mr. Quiet is, what are the scenarios you want us to run? Right? And so we can look at a number of scenarios. And then we're also waiting, again, to see what the legislators bring out. We're at the kind of halftime mark. We'll see what the next month or so brings in terms of potential changes. And then we would recreate this model for the district to understand what do those impacts have and what's the revenue look like moving forward for the district in those pieces. The last piece that's really kind of, I think, an interesting chart within this is we sometimes talk about if the district were to maybe decrease their rate, right? What impact would that have? And what this chart really says is if you were to decrease your debt service rate by $1, the total decrease would actually be 77 cents in total levy because you create circuit break relief. And you would actually get 23 cents theoretically back into your operations fund. So again, we talk levers. If I reduce tax rate, I push more dollars into the operations fund. If I increase tax rate, I'm going to see fewer dollars in the operations fund. But in terms of total levy, when I reduce, I actually end up with fewer dollars. So it's this kind of push-pull a little bit in terms of that, of what projects do you have? Where do you need to see your debt service rate? And is it beneficial to lower that? Because you're not going to get dollar for dollar back in the operations fund, is really what it's saying. All right. So if you reduce by $1 in your debt service, you're not going to get $1 back in your operations fund. Right. And so that's an important metric to kind of measure to know, again, where are your strengths and where are your liabilities in terms of funding, and how do you, again, kind of try to maximize the dollars that you're receiving on an annual basis into each of those funds. The last piece within this is if we decrease the rate, how many people would no longer be at the cap, right? And what it says is if you decreased your debt service rate by about 10 cents, only another 500 people in the community, 500 homes out of 20,000 almost, would no longer be at the cap. Okay, that's a pretty substantial. That's roughly a little over 10% reduction in your tax rate. Doesn't generate a whole lot of tax relief because so many people are already currently at the property tax cap. Okay, and so again, that's one of the metrics we always, we want to be good stewards of those dollars, but at the end of the day, if we reduce by that 10 cents, does it generate the impact that we're hoping for on homesteads? When you reduce your tax rate, if you go back to that original slide, when you see like the $3 tax rate, like in the city where we have all those overlapping units, most of your homeowners are all going to be at the caps. Most of your 2% are going to be at the cap. So when you increase or decrease, in this case, decrease rates, who first sees that tax relief? It goes businesses, then apartments, then homeowners. So sometimes, again, we think, hey, we're going to lower that rate and our homeowners are going to see a difference. It's actually going to work in a reverse piece. And again, it doesn't mean we don't do those pieces, but I think it's an important concept to understand of is the impact, the intent that we want in terms of those pieces, right, within that. And, you may think by lowering it, you've impacted homeowners, and then homeowners come back with feedback saying, my tax bill hasn't changed. Well, it's because they're already at the cap, and that move will not impact them. Same kind of chart. I'll go through that quickly just in terms of an increase for the board. I'll allow you to kind of look through those pieces, allow Mr. Quiet to kind of follow up, but it's really the same thing, kind of an inverse, just helping understand if we push pull where those dollars come from. The last piece I want to spend just quickly a little time going through, I think is really important, is understanding your tax rate. Tax rates are really driven by assessed value. The more assessed value you have, the lower your tax rate can be and really generate the same amount of revenue. So we look at assessed value kind of on a per student basis. Allows us to compare school sizes. And so on this chart, this is kind of within Elkhart County. You can see that you're just below the state average when it comes from AV per student. Okay, and so what typically happens is the districts you see on the right-hand side of this chart, we're going to show another one here in just a second. They're going to be on the left-hand side because they're going to have a higher tax rate. Lower AV tends to generate a higher tax rate. And then in the top right-hand side, you can see where you fall really in regards to the state as well. So when we look at this, if you look at a Concord, a Goshen, that are now on the left-hand side having a higher tax rate, if you were to go back to the previous slide, they had lower AV per student. You're a little bit of an anomaly on this chart. Okay, you have mid-size, kind of in the middle of the road AV per student, but overall you have a fairly low tax rate. It's lower than the state average, primarily in that debt service fund. That's Again, you can see your debt service tax rate's only 29 cents, and you can see some of the comparative rates within those pieces. So again, just something to be aware of in terms of your ability to, I guess, when we talk with districts about tax rates, it's a hard conversation because at times it can sound having a low tax rate is a good thing, and having a low debt service rate tax rate can be a good thing. We worked with a district recently that had a 5-cent tax rate. Sounds great. But they had gone many years without doing necessary projects, and it caught up with them. And they had so much deferred maintenance that this year they're having to do a 29-cent tax rate in order to make up for that, right? Because our buildings need to be reinvested in. And so is that the right measure in terms of the investments, in terms of your facilities, in that? And that's a question for the district to understand, right? What's your capital project plan? And is that rate giving you what you need in terms of reinvesting in your buildings? Because projects get more expensive over time, and you need to invest within those. And so it's an interesting question because the outset we look at it and say low rate, that's great, but is it allowing us to invest in our buildings in the way that we need to, right? To keep them safe and functional. Really same data here. This just expands this. So now this is based on ADM, so 5 districts that are larger, and then the 5 districts that are just below you in terms of enrollment. Again, you really fall in that middle area in terms of assessed value, but you can start to now see a little wider gap, right? This got a little wider as we stepped outside of Elkhart County, and you see some districts, especially down in that central Indiana donut area, that have some pretty high assessed value, got a lot of business in their community, some high value homes. And that, again, is going to typically allow them to have a lower tax rate overall in terms of this. But again, in this group, you really stand out. You have a really overall pretty low tax rate. And I think, again, not encouraging the district that you need to do projects and those pieces, right? But I think when you look across the board, where's the difference? It's really in that debt service piece. And that in terms of dollars, that's really where the rate difference is for the district. And I think, again, that's a conversation for the board to consider within those pieces. That's really it. I know it's a little bit fast and furious. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. You know, I think the overall take I would give to the district is right now you've got a pretty diverse tax base that's allowing you to have a little bit lower rate overall, despite that kind of lower per student AV. It's allowing you to generate some revenue, some decent revenue in terms of operations fund. I think it's a piece to watch because as this legislative session happens, a lot of the maneuvers they're discussing would, again, I'll go back to the point, you could do nothing different next year and that 92-cent tax rate could be $1.05. And you've done nothing different. It's because they may, again, if they give additional deductions to homeowners and they lower your AV, as AV goes down, the rate has to go up to generate the revenue that you're currently generating. And so again, you may have the same amount of revenue from one year to the next and yet a higher tax rate within those pieces. And so I just bring that up. We talk with that with a lot of our districts because that, especially those that have been managing to a rate like a 92 cents, you may have to open up that paradigm and that mindset in terms of where that's at because it's going to be forced upon some of that relief that might be out there. The other big one to watch is personal property. That's the equipment inside of a business. There's 2 bills that would eliminate that. If that goes away, it really forces the liability onto some of those other areas like homeowners, like other businesses. So again, some of those moves are going to have some impact, not only on you, potentially in terms of revenue, but in terms of what we often say is who pays, right? At the end of the day, who's bringing those dollars to the table. And so really today and tonight was just to kind of set that baseline that we'll continue to monitor. We'll continue to work with the district as these things come out. But appreciate it. And again, happy to take any questions.
Good. Great job. Thank you.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Well, yeah, thank you, Barry, for that. very informative. I think it's always good to keep on top of where we're at as a district. I would like to point out, and one of the things I find interesting is when he shared with us where that dollar goes to, only 23 cents, right, we gain from the circuit breaker. But you also look at that reallocation to other taxing units is 35 cents. So more dollars are going into some of those other taxing units levies as we reduce our potential levy impact. So, but yes, thank you, Barry. I think this is very informative. I hope it was informative for the group. And that concludes our session here. Thank you.
I can see everybody's just enamored with the finances that we've seen tonight. No, thank you very much. Is there anything else? Nothing else. I will adjourn the work session.
Hi, honey. Are you doing an update? Just, okay, just hanging out? Okay. Well, good. Okay, just, yeah, just whatever. Is it going well? Is it going well? Yeah. Okay. Okay, good. It's good to see you. Yes. Say Veterans Day.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming out tonight to the February 25th, 2025 Elkhart Community Schools regular board meeting. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Elkhart Promise, Ms. Davis.
Every student is known by name, challenged, and supported by highly effective staff, and in partnership with the community will graduate career, college, and life ready.
Thank you very much, Ms. Davis. Next, we have our invitation to speak protocol. All of you tonight should have had one of these on your seat. On the right-hand side, there's a little form here. Please fill it out with your name and your affiliation with Elkhart Community Schools. All agenda and non-agenda items can be discussed during our public comment section. Please come to the microphone, state your name, and again, your association with the district. You'll have a maximum of 3 minutes. Dora, do we have anybody? Okay. Thank you. Is it Daniel Walsh?
Hi, my name is Dan Walsh. I've been up here before. I think you know who I am. A high school teacher at Elkhart High School. I'm here to present my letter of resignation to the board. I formally gave it to my chain of command this afternoon, but this is presenting it to the board. I really don't have much to say. So.
Thank you. All right. No other public comment. Next on the agenda is board member recognition.
Good evening, President Scott, members of the board. Seems like last month we really missed Board Member Appreciation Month. We recognize you, but we did not recognize you in the official capacity that we should. One of the things that I want to personally thank you for, I'm sure my team feels the same sentiment, your hard work, your advocacy, all the things that you do for children and for our community. I can tell you in my year here that I would not have been able to survive literally without the support and the leadership that you provide on a daily basis. We know that you sacrifice tons of your time, tons of your energy, but most importantly, you do it for the best interests of our kids and our community. All of you are longstanding members here in Elkhart, and we know that you lead with love, compassion, but most importantly, you have to make some really tough decisions. This is not only a thankless job at times, but I also think it can be the one of the most rewarding that we can have for our kids. So I just want to tell you from the bottom of my heart, and I think I speak for our team and our community, we would like to just give you a personal acknowledgement for a little bit of the hard work that you do. So at this time, we would like to call you up and personally celebrate you just a little bit. So I will let my lovely assistant Dora help me to lead this cause.
All of you are doing them one at a time?
Yeah, I want to do them one at a time.
lighting would be better right there.
The first up is Ms. Davis. Don't worry, Kelly. You need to watch.
Oh, shit, it's another thing I have to dust. I said, oh, shit, it's another thing I have to dust.
Mr. Mike Burnett.
Aw.
Thank you. You do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Look, here's my smile.
Mr. Scott.
So scary.
Felt like we were calling the principal's office.
Should I get Doug's? Make a little speech.
You can just, this is what I can tell you. I can show 5,000 pictures of Doug in Mexico because he's been sending them to me every 5 minutes.
And Bonfeld.
Who cares? We're not judging, it's the moment.
You got to stay on your smile.
No, do you see how I smile? I'm like this.
Mr. Eric Ivory.
Could I get one picture with everybody?
Sure.
I think we're.
She would like
Yes.
to picture.
Yeah. Do we bring these or?
Yeah, bring these.
Bring the thing.
I don't want to be.
What a nice surprise.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations to all of you. Well deserved. You gonna leave yours sitting out? Oh, okay.
Well, thank you very much. Great. Next on the agenda, Excellence of Elkhart. Ms. Wagler.
All right. Thank you, President Scott, members of the board, Dr. Huff, and the community. The annual Trailblazer Awards celebrated the top African-American students excelling in academics and athletics. Chapter President Robert Taylor emphasized the event's mission was to highlight student achievement and celebrate education during Black History Month. Among the honorees was Amarion Kemry, who is recognized for having one of the highest GPAs in Elkhart Community Schools. Congratulations to our own Adriana Brown, who is named the Boys and Girls Club of Elkhart County's Youth of the Year. The honor recognizes teens who show passion, drive, and a commitment to making a difference. Incoming freshman night at the freshman division gave students a head start on their high school journey. They learned about expectations, scheduling, athletic requirements, and many of the clubs available at the high school, and they got to travel around the gymnasium and ask questions of those in attendance. And congratulations to Roosevelt STEAM Academy students Ezekiel Hammondtree and Cruz Brenneman for winning first place in the City Science Fair. Also, a big shout out to Amaranthia. I hope I said her name correctly. Amaranthia Hostetler, first place and Best in Show, and Zendaya Reyes, first place and Best Project for their outstanding work. And I think in April, they go on to Regional Science Fair. Beardsley's first and second graders gave a wonderful performance of the Winter Song Festival, and we always love to hear the young voices and look forward to seeing how they grow in their musical education throughout the years. Congratulations to Chance McCullough and Brennan Wicker for competing at the state wrestling finals, and a special shout out to Chance for finishing 6th in the 165-pound division, which was an incredible achievement. And congratulations to both Pinewood on the left and Mary Feeser Elementary girls basketball teams for making it to the finals for our elementary sports. And a special shout out because Pinewood Panthers won the championship. This is their second district win this year because they also had an undefeated girls volleyball team. So they're really putting the pressure on in Pinewood. And, oops. There we go. We had one other recipient of the Indiana Blacks Expo's prestigious Trailblazer Award, and this was the Garvin Robertson Award given to a student who excels in both academics and athletics. This year's recipient was Anthony Leonard Jr. He has a 3.8 GPA. He's a multi-sport athlete and a state track competitor. And the chapter president, Robert Taylor, praised him for being such a role model for his peers and an inspiration to the entire community. So we are very proud of him. We are getting to the busy season in the school year. So just in the next couple of weeks, this is just a snapshot of what's going on. But I would invite you all out February 27th to Roosevelt STEAM Academy to their Black History Month celebration. This weekend also Circle the State, and we are hosting basketball sectionals, and that will be next week along with SAT and e-learning. And then we will continue our music with ISMA Jazz Festival. Don't forget the Elkhart High School musical 9 to 5. And for parents who were not able to make it out to College Goal Sunday this past Sunday, there are 2 other opportunities in March where they can come and get FAFSA assistance and help with college. So, and as always, stay up to date with our social media, and we will be posting stories on there and our website. Thank you so much.
Aaron?
Thanks, Aaron.
Next on the agenda, we have the consent items. Do I have a motion? I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second. Do I have any discussion from the board?
Okay, so we will take a moment of
Kelly.
silence. Oh.
Thank
We'll
you.
take you're welcome, a moment of silence for, a couple of losses that we just experienced in our school system, and one for one of our staff members that is needing prayer over healing. So Peggy Thomas, who is Tanisha Dale's mother and the mother-in-law to Rodney Dale, who was a former board member and also our chief of the fire department. She was cafeteria specialist at our Hawthorne Early Learning Center. So a moment of silence in the loss of Peggy. And, some of our members know her very well, but I took a chance to read over her, obituary too, which was really, truly one of the most beautiful stories of a life. But inside of it, it was just joy, 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 smile, cooking, people coming over to her house, always being at church, even when her pastor is you need to go home. And she's no, I'm not going home. Just overwhelming. When you talk about walking with Jesus and being a servant of the Lord to others in our community, if only to be a small smidgen of her, it was so beautiful. So very sorry for the loss of her. And we just found out, today he is also a neighbor of our own Eric Ivory's here, but it is Lorna Suggs. So she is our teacher, baby holder for our teenage pregnancy program. So like our teenage mothers have this beautiful program over at our early learning center. And Lorna not only takes care of those babies, but she also like guides our students, but it's what she does with all of the kids inside of there. So Lorna unexpectedly lost her husband on Sunday, and she just even popped back in the school today because she just needed a moment of the babies to give her a little bit of healing. So, prayers for her. And then Betty Harris, who is our cafeteria specialist manager at Monger. She, had a very, very serious medical issue, and she is recovering right now and needs plenty of prayers. So if we could just say, take a moment of celebrating life and praying for another. And it's always difficult to transition in. And I've said that before at other meetings, when you move from like a moment of that, but it's always celebrating life and being thankful for the moments that we have. But we also say goodbye to a custodian of ours for the reason that he's retiring. So it's a joyful thing, but 23 years as our Elkhart Area Career Center custodian. And so if you went to the Career Center, there's something special about those custodians because they're aware of everything that's going on and the timing that's coming in each one of the students. And for us, like they played a very significant role even when I was back at that school of knowing what's happening. So like we could not be more appreciative of the years of service that he had in taking care of all of the students over there. And that is all I have. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I just real quick, just because you mentioned that, I would be remiss if I didn't also publicly acknowledge Joanne and Lauren and the Mr. and Mrs. Suggs. Great family, no doubt. They are, hurting, need some prayers and thoughts. And so, she is a wonderful young lady. He will definitely be missed. And much like Mrs. Thomas Curry as well, right? She service for 6 years in our lunchroom, life of service in the community. So I just wanted to also acknowledge those two people. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah. So on a different note, donations. So if you guys did not know this, we have a boys volleyball team, and they are starting to gain momentum, and it's pretty amazing. So the Elkhart Athletic Club donated $850, and then again, the Career Center's automotive program received a $1,500 donation from the Michiana Mustangs, which is James Yoder, who's a huge supporter of our program. And then this is always a cool one. It is $1,000 from Get Wet for a Vet. And that is to our AFJROTC. Again, they're just gaining so much momentum. And that group is growing, and it's pretty phenomenal. So $3,350 from our community. So thank you again, Elkhart donors.
Kelly, anything
Yeah.
else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have old business. Mr. Thorne, Board Policy 3120.08 CS, employment of personnel for extracurricular activities.
Thank you and good evening, President Scott, members of the board, Dr. Huff. This evening, the administration is requesting approval of proposed revisions to this policy. Initially, the policy was updated to reflect changes required under the law related to the qualifications needed to serve as a coach or sponsor of extracurricular activities, as well as requirements for our coaching staff set by the Indiana High School Athletic Association. Since the February 11th meeting, we have made further revisions to remove some duplicative provisions within the policy as originally presented and to improve the overall organization of the policy, and we're seeking approval of the policy this evening.
Mr. Thorne, do I have a motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second? Second. I have a motion and a second. Do I have any discussion or questions? Seeing or hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next, we have Board Policy 3122.01 ACS, drug-free workplace.
Thank you. Tonight, the administration is requesting approval of this proposed policy. The policy codifies the present expectations that employees who report for duty or attend a corporation-sponsored function while under the influence of drugs or alcohol may be subject to disciplinary consequences. Again, we're seeking approval of this policy tonight.
Thank you. Do I have a motion? I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and I have a second. Any questions or discussions from the board? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have Board Policy 5340.01, Student Concussions and Sudden Cardiac Arrest.
The administration is recommending approval of this proposed policy. The proposed policy addresses the ongoing training requirements for district employees supervising athletics and other activities where there exists an enhanced risk of concussion and or sudden cardiac arrest.
Thank you. Do I have a motion? Motion. Second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Do I have any discussion or comment from the board? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have for review only Administrative Regulation JE-1, Kindergarten Early Interest Procedure. Did I miss one?
Yeah, Mr. Scott, I believe you missed 5410.
I will back up. We have Board Policy 5410, Promotion, Placement, and Retention.
Thank you so much. This evening, the administration is seeking approval of, by the board of the proposed revisions to this policy. The primary rationale for these proposed revisions is to address the changes mandated under the law related to passage of the IREAD 3 examination by the district students.
Thank you. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Do I have any discussion or questions from the board? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now, we have for review only, Administrative Regulations JE-1, Kindergarten Early Entrance Procedure and Application Form.
Tonight, the administration is presenting for further consideration proposed revisions to this regulation, which will be provided to parents who might be requesting early entrance into kindergarten. The intent of the proposed revisions is to assure that district officials have sufficient information to assess whether or not applicants are ready for kindergarten.
Fine. Is that it?
That is it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next, we have new business. Mr. Quiet. Wellness Services Recommendation.
Yes, thank you, President Scott, members of the board, Dr. Huff. The business office is asking for the board's approval of a wellness consulting and brokerage service agreement. Per board policy 6320, we conducted an RFP for these services based on some concerns that the cost and perceived value of this plan may be hindering hiring or retention. And so we went out and sought some RFPs. We had 4 responses. LHD, who is our incumbent, USI, Gibson, and Gallagher all responded to that call. They were evaluated on firm experience, strategic approach, technology and analytics, vendor management, employee education, the references and costs. After some review, I think we learned some very valuable insights, and I think a term that continued to come up is a plan, poor plan, well communicated is better than a great plan poorly communicated, and the emphasis that is needed to help our employees understand the value that we provide in wellness services, which primarily our health plan and agreements associated with that, is valuably important. We invest a lot of money in this district to provide those as we should. And so with that, the recommendation is that we transition from LHD to Gallagher for those wellness consultant services. That would be effective April 1, with the goal that we are educating and improving communications to our employees around that wellness plan.
Mr. Quiet, do I have a motion? Motion. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Do I have any questions or discussions from the board? Adora, I would call for a roll call vote on this. I will be abstaining because of my association within the industry and my affiliation with Gallagher.
Eric Ivory
Yes.
and Vondervellen. Yes. Kelly Mullins. Yes. Mike Burnett,
Yes.
Stacy Davis.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses and 1 abstain. Next, Mr. Require resolution confirming lease and taking other actions for the 2025 middle school renovation and facilities update project.
Yes, thank you, President Scott. These next two items I will give a brief update on, and we will need to open for public comment briefly. Then we can close that, and I'll ask the board to vote on these individual resolutions or recommendations. So the first resolution confirming lease and taking other actions on the 2025 middle school renovations and facilities update. As the board will remember, we've previously approved the lease agreement with Elkhart Community School Corporation to facilitate the renovations at all 3 middle schools. This resolution confirms the lease execution and permits the issuance of the bonds to finance the projects. The financing plan includes $6.6 million in bonds per school, totaling $19.8 million allocated for renovations and facility improvements. As you recall, a public hearing was held, ensuring transparency and confirming that the lease terms were fair and reasonable. Additionally, we'll be asking that the board approve the appropriations resolution for the 2025 middle school renovations and facility update project. This resolution authorizes the appropriations of bond proceeds and interest earnings to fund the middle school projects. It outlines the financial framework for using the bond funds to cover expenses such as land acquisition, construction, and associated costs. At this time, I would ask that we suspend the meeting and open for public comment if there is any.
Very good. At this time, I will suspend our normal board meeting and open it up for public comment. Is there any public comment? One more time. Anybody?
Just excited that we're investing so much in the middle schools with the way that we're.
Can you come up and,
I'm sorry,
yeah, please come up to the microphone.
didn't want to be that formal.
No, I just wanted to state that I know that that's a lot of money, and I'm very excited that we are investing that much into all 3 of the schools, and I think that that'll benefit greatly. And I also think that it will ease the minds of the parents whose 5th incoming 6th graders who in the beginning felt rushed. That gives us some peace of mind that those incoming 6th graders will be given the resources that they need. So I just think that's an awesome investment. So.
Very good.
Yep.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Hearing or seeing no other public comment, I will now close the public comment portion and open the board meeting back up.
Thank you, President Scott. At this time, I would ask that the board approve the resolution confirming lease and taking other actions for the 2025 middle school renovations and facility update project.
Do I have a motion? I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Do I have any discussion or questions from the board? Seeing or hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Next one is the appropriation resolution for the 2025 middle school renovations and facility update project. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and I have a second. Do I have any questions or discussions from the board regarding this resolution? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Oh, now we have the financial report.
Yes, thank you, President Scott, Board of Trustees, and Dr. Huff. Brief financial update. January was a 3-pay period month. Expenditures were high but expected with a 3-pay period month. It did eat into a bit of the cash balance, but as expected. Additionally, I would note that the food service fund, you'll see a lower than usual cash balance. There has been a delay in our revenues in terms of receiving those. So December and January revenues were not received until February. And so there's quite a bit of lag there in those revenues to offset the expenses in that cash balance projection. So I just want to make sure that was noted. But that concludes my report, the financial report. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions from the board on the financial report? We're good. Thank you, Mr. Quay. Next on the agenda, Dr. Huff.
Thank you, President Scott, members of the board, community. Just want to wish our robotics team luck this Saturday as they compete at Penn. And I'm surely they're going to take home, Lisa, did they get gold medals? What do they get? Yes, I don't know. No, they're going to win. They're going to be first place. That's it.
Gold medals, trophies.
No, they get, no, they're not, no.
They get a plaque like yours.
Matter of fact, we're going to give them yours. But no, I'm just excited. When we talk about having our kids go out and compete, they learn not just how to do the activity through robotics, but competition and collaboration and also teamwork, things that are going to make them also very attractive in the workforce and in their college careers. So I just want to say thank you to all the members who are getting those kids prepared for this Saturday. Additionally, I had an opportunity to attend the e-penning ceremony this last Wednesday at the high school. That was 14 of our most outstanding seniors who, some were juniors too, was a combination of their academic prowess, their civic prowess around the campus, and also some of the things that they participate, whether it's in sports or in athletics. It was really nice to see students come back and just talk to kids who've gone out and made into in the world. Jeff Miller and Julie Terakowski, they do a really good job of putting on this event for the kids. I also, it was a great time for the parents as well. Seeing these kids' GPAs in Notre Dame, they're going to Notre Dame. Some are going to Stanford. Some are going to Texas A&M. Some are very proud going to Ball State, IUSB. I just want to let them know that we're very proud of you and that we don't just give those e-pens away. It's kind of like a Letterman's jacket, and they wear them with pride. So if you see a kid wear it with that big giant E on their Letterman's jacket, you know that they earned it. So look forward to seeing you around our campus.
Ohio State.
I'm sorry?
Ohio State.
What about it?
Anybody going to?
No, there's been a huge change in life plans in Ohio State. I'm now a Hawaii fan, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay.
For some very personal reasons. He's trying to throw me off, isn't he, Dory? Anyway, also I want to give a huge shout out to someone who you may or may not see all the time, but their work is evident in everything we do. And that is Jamie Snyder, who is our director of risk and assessment here on the campus. He is a huge, just keeps our kids safe. And he also is our main contact with EPD. He's sitting back there very humble. But this week we had a threat on our campus, and his communication, his level of professionalism, and how quickly he responds to situations. He's always available. I think him and his team definitely deserve to be recognized. They keep our kids safe on a day-to-day basis and help us to make really good decisions and also to communicate to our public. Thank goodness it wasn't anything that was any district that was even close. It was in another state, but he really is a huge wealth of knowledge in there. So Jamie, I just want to say thank you for all that you do. Really appreciate you and how you handle yourself in those situations, always professionally, but you always make sure that we are accurate before we send out information. So really appreciate you, sir. And thank your team as well. Last and certainly not least, I know our kiddos are really prepping hard for iRead passing and at all the 13 elementary schools. So I just want to say we really recognize your hard work. Teachers, thank you for getting them second and third graders ready for that very important assessment. And kiddos, we know that you can do it too. So everyone on our team is not only rooting for you, we are also going to be making sure that we're the first ones to give you high fives after your teachers to make sure that you do very well on that very critical assessment. So at our next board meeting, I look forward to giving our board a private update because that will be encumbered information. But I think that our kids are going to do very well this season on that very important assessment. So lots of things are happening in the Elkhart Community Schools. We are definitely a destination district for everyone. And also lastly, for everyone who joined our school family tonight, we welcome you. We saw lots of names on the HR report. So we're glad to have you join the Elkhart family. And I'm going to turn it back over to you, President Scott.
Thank you, Dr. Huff. Do we have anything from the board this evening?
Well, of course, we want to wish all of our music department, everybody competing in ISMA this weekend. A very big good luck. We have a ton of kids going to perform. So Aaron, I'm looking forward to your report on all of our gold medals from our junior high all the way through our high school. So don't forget your tickets for 9 to 5. And as we prepare to think about March, you'll have a flyer, I'm sure, but it'll be the athletic fundraiser, which will be a themed trivia night. $200 a table, March 29th, phenomenal prizes, great opportunity for you as an administrative staff to think about how you can buy a table, dress up, and, throw some trivia out there. All right.
You heard that as events, so go, I hope,
Uh-huh.
Mark, you heard it. Yeah, you heard it. You said March 9th?
29th.
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 Okay,
Mhm.
29th. Okay, we got time.
All right. No pressure. Just kidding. Yeah. That's it. What do you have?
Anything else? No? Well, then I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for coming.